I'm Riley Ross. Recently, I sat down with former state senator Connie Johnson. She is a gubernatorial candidate in the 2018 governor's race. She was actually the first person to announce her candidacy for the position. We had a long conversation, so I want to get right into it. We talk about some pretty fantastic stuff, from race.
At Douglas, there were master's degree and PhD level teachers.
Really?
Because they couldn't teach anywhere else.
Right.
1970 and 71 is when integration kicked in. They took these qualified teachers, black teachers, and to put them over in schools like U.S. Grant, Southeast, Capitol Hill, because that's where kids got bused from the east side to Capitol Hill, right? And instead they put into Douglas young white women just coming out of college. So it changed the quality of education.
To the process of governing.
Government waste is no worse than government underperforming.
And agriculture, I guess.
My solution for an economic boom in Oklahoma and advocating for changing our policies about cannabis. One form is marijuana and one form is hemp. It grows between the cracks of the concrete here 4 times a year. It only grows 2 times a year in Colorado.
This is Y'all Okay. Howdy, friends and neighbors. Welcome to Y'all Okay, a podcast about the state of Oklahoma and the people connected to it. I am going to forego a long intro today and get right into the interview with Connie Johnson. A very special thanks to Senator Johnson for allowing me to come to her office and sit down with her and take so much of her time. I really appreciate it. Off mic, I brought up a couple of things, but to save time, I'm going to tell you the context of them. I brought up the conversation of race off mic, and even mentioned a recent episode of the Malcolm Gladwell podcast, Revisionist History, where he talks about Brown versus Board of Education and the poor implementation or some of the side effects of a poor implementation of integration as opposed to separate but equal. So with that said, let's get right into it with my interview with former state senator Connie Johnson. This episode is sponsored by Al's Bicycles Northwest at 7930 North MacArthur. This is a sponsorship of the show and not necessarily an endorsement of the candidate that we have on the show. They've got all sorts of bikes from mountain road. We're getting into cyclocross season, so if that's something you're interested in, Al's Bicycles Northwest can set you up with all your cyclocross needs. I recently picked up a tow bar that it's like a trailer bar, so I can attach it to my youngest kid's bicycle, and then the back of the bar fits on the kid's bicycle, and then the front of the bar fits on my seat post, and I can swing my kids around Lake Hefner behind me, which is pretty cool. The downside, of course, is me being in the front. I get to get all the gnats in my face once we go around the dam, and the kid gets nothing. No gnats in his face, which I feel is unfair. But that's not Al's Bicycles Northwest's fault. So give them a call at 405-728-7100. They're just a block north of Northwest Expressway on MacArthur. That's Al's Bicycles Northwest. Thanks.
I was on staff for 24 years. So I did Medicare, Medicaid, health care, health, you name it, human services, elderly.
Did you work for a specific legislator? Yeah, senator?
I was on Senate staff, so they have a central staff.
Okay.
And so I worked based on an area. So any senator that needed information in health and human services, I was the substantive language person, and then there was a fiscal staff person.
Okay.
So
All
between the two of us, we got it covered.
Wow.
But Senator Bernice Kane was my main senator. He was chair of Health and Human Services for all those years.
Okay.
The gatekeeper for women's reproductive rights.
Yeah.
And, he really let me do a lot. I see him as my mentor.
Yeah.
Then when I ran for office, he helped me figure it out, how to get elected. And he's having a fundraiser for me tomorrow night.
Oh, okay, cool. I think
Yeah.
I saw something about that on Facebook.
On Facebook, yeah. So, good guy. But, he didn't confine me to the Capitol because I was kind of in the community, too. Mm-hmm. And it was important to me to share with my community that stuff was not rocket science.
Yeah.
That, and you learned it in government. But here's the real deal. So you got to vote. You got to talk to your legislators. You got to, hold them accountable. You got to educate yourself about the issues. And, my people probably are the least engaged and the most impacted.
Yeah.
Especially in the areas of criminal justice and poor health and just all kinds of disparities.
And I'm sitting here with Connie Johnson. Welcome. Thank you for being on the show, by the way. We went ahead and started in, which is fine.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share my message through whatever mediums. And so my friend Pat Lewis connected us.
That's
and
right.
He's a good friend.
Have you been on many podcasts?
This is probably my second one.
Oh, okay.
And I was pleased with the first one, so I'm excited to do this one.
All right, good. I think it's a new and exciting medium. You should know I don't do a ton of research on my guests because I like it to be a conversation. But I did a little bit because you've got some out there, and especially as a gubernatorial candidate and a previous state senator. You ran for U.S. Senate, so there's a bit of information out there for you.
I got a past.
What is you were born in Holdenville?
Yes.
Of all places.
Yes. My parents were living in Dustin, Oklahoma.
Did you say Dustin?
Dustin. Mm-hmm. And I tell my mom that I know that I was the product of some tender August night because when I was born, she had 4 children under 4.
Oh, no.
So Holdenville was the closest hospital, and that was her hometown. Mm-hmm. So I went there to be born, and so we lived in Dustin until I was 3.
Where is Dustin in relation to things?
It is in between, I want to say Holdenville and McAllister.
Oh, okay. All right,
so
cool.
It's right around there, Wynnewood,
straight
Wetumpka.
Up middle of nowhere.
Yeah, straight up middle of nowhere. Dustin, Mount Vernon, Oklahoma.
Okay.
But I spent summers, just like most kids do, in Holdenville with my grandmother.
Okay.
So, I can relate to Holdenville, blackest dirt I've ever seen. But, you had 2 streets. You went up Chestnut and then the other street, and that was pretty much, church was on one end. Sam Isaac's store was across the street. We knew how to go there, and it was a wonderful time in Holdenville.
Not bad for a county seat.
Not bad for a county seat, Hughes County seat. Well, and it was a typical arrangement for a town. Mm-hmm. We lived on this side of the tracks. In fact, my grandmother's house was right next to the railroad tracks. And, I didn't know what that meant at that time, but that was where the black community was. Mm-hmm. And all I knew was just stand out there and wave at the train caboose guy, the engine operator, when they went by, and they always waved to us. So, I probably had an interesting life and didn't realize it. I just thought, this is here comes the train. We wave bye-bye.
Yeah. And so you said you guys moved from that area to Oklahoma City when you were 3?
No, from there we went even deeper.
Oh, okay.
We went to Ida Bell. My dad was a teacher. We were actually in Dustin because he was part of an experiment to put a black family in an all-white town. And
really? So you guys were like the guinea pigs?
We were guinea pigs, yeah.
Wow. And this was during that day when
1952.
So that was an age of like sundown towns and stuff like that. And,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that? Do you remember the emotions of that period? Was it ever scary or anything? Or?
No, because we moved when I was 3.
Yeah.
I just remember a snake being in the well one time. You know, I remember there was evidently a crisis where the propane might have been left on or something in the house, and they had to get all of us out. My dad rushed back home because, you know, my mom was there with 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the details of what happened or anything. Those are the only 2 things I recall about Dustin. But I recall that Mount Vernon and Vernon next door were pretty much all black communities, and that's where we spent a lot of time. So Mr. Watley, Brother Willie Watley, subsequently was the janitor at my junior high school. And he and I belong to the same church today.
Wow.
And he will be 100 years old on December 17th of this year.
Oh, that's amazing.
So Brother Watley has been a constant in my life.
Wow.
He knew me before I knew me. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We're going to try to do a big 100-year celebration for him.
Oh, that would be neat. How long were y'all in Idabel?
We were in Idabel from the age of 3 to 6, and my dad got a teaching job there.
Okay.
And they were totally immersed in the community. My mom was strong in the church, in the Baptist church. She sang in the choir. He was an usher. He was a teacher. I remember we had choir rehearsal at the funeral home because the funeral director's wife was the pianist for the church.
Okay.
And it's the funniest thing because we were in there rehearsing one day, and for some strange reason, she would always make us walk around and view the bodies, right?
Really?
It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
So one day, this guy sat up in the casket. So we never had rehearsal in there again.
Oh, my gosh.
But Idabel was different. Again, there was some tracks, and we pretty much stayed on this side of our side of town. We were very sheltered as children, so I'm not really familiar with a bunch of racist things that might have been directed at us. Yeah. Even though I know Idabel was a special place, I was never exposed to that. Okay. I think the one time, and I knew that whenever we traveled to Oklahoma City, we had to pack a lunch. Because, you know, you get so far and you stop and eat. And, of course, the Indian Nation Turnpike wasn't there. Right. So you're talking about back roads. We were on back roads.
Sure enough.
We would pack a lunch and, you know, stop somewhere midway and then go into Oklahoma City. I remember those trips. I remember when we moved, it was the same thing. But I had friends in Idabel. I still know a lot of those people today. The Nunleys, a lot of people from Idabel live in Oklahoma City now. Yeah, there's enough people in Oklahoma City from Idabel to have an Idabel club in Oklahoma City.
Oh, I imagine so. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in most of those rural towns and stuff, they've
migrate to the city.
Yeah, they've had to migrate to the city.
Yeah,
just agriculture sort of lost its mojo.
Yeah,
I guess I don't know the best way to say that, but so I wonder, with your dad as a black teacher in these white communities, were they integrated schools? Like, what do you remember much about his teaching experience? Did he have to teach reluctant white kids or deal with white parents or anything like that? Or?
See, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. He graduated from Langston University.
Okay.
With a degree in education, and I don't know how he got access to that special project, but it could be some family relationships who gave him an inroad, a hookup, you know.
That's cool.
But I do know that when he went to work in Idabel, he knew Mr. O.M. McDaniels, who was the principal of Booker T. Washington High School in Idabel. And so it was from that personal relationship that he was hired.
Okay.
Well, so, you know, talking about separate but equal, right? And that thing finally trickled down to Oklahoma, I want to say, ultimately, in 1970, 71.
Oh, really?
Because we had a landmark case with Dr. Dowell suing the Oklahoma City Public Schools. And that's what put the program in place to integrate the schools in Oklahoma City.
In 1970 what?
One was when full integration went full-blown in Oklahoma City. Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. And it was the biggest mistake we could have ever made. And not so much that black teachers were fired. Mm-hmm. So let's back up a little, and I'll get back to that. Put a pin in that.
All right.
So my dad is teaching in Ida Bell. We're there for 3 years. By the time I'm 6, I go to kindergarten there. You know, my brother is like 3.5 years older than me. My sisters that are twins are 1.5 years older than me. So they actually got into the school system. I only went to kindergarten.
Right.
And then my dad got a job in Oklahoma City, teaching at an elementary school, Crescent Hills Elementary School. We moved to Oklahoma City at a time when the color line was Northeast 23rd Street.
Yeah.
So the color line had been 1st Street, 2nd Street, 4th Street, 6th Street, 8th Street, 10th Street, 16th, 23rd.
All right.
By the time we got to town, 1958.
Yeah.
My next door neighbor was white, and they were elderly, and they were too old to take flight.
Okay.
So Mr. Ballou, that relationship, and my mom kind of ended up being their caregiver in the end, but he had the most interesting books, and I was a nerd. So I was over there reading books all the time. That's why I read about Darwin's theory of natural selection, and I read Big Brother over there. And, you know, I just kind of had that interesting side of the experience to the right side of us. Mm-hmm. On the left side of us was the blackest lady I had ever seen in my life, Miss Nettie Jackson. She was a yellow dog Democrat.
Yeah.
And so on the other side of me, I got exposed to politics. Mm-hmm. And she sponsored me as I organized the First Teen Democrat Club in Oklahoma, on the east side in Oklahoma City.
Really?
So growing up, and Crescent Hills is where Kirk Humphreys grew up, right?
Yeah.
So it was a pretty okay to do area.
Yeah.
A lot of the people who lived over there had good jobs at Tinker. You know, my dad was a teacher. They thought we had it good, but, you know, we were poor.
Right.
I mean, there were 4 kids, right?
Sure.
And so I went to Crescent Hills Elementary School. It was a deal where I could walk to school. So I went there through the 6th grade. My daddy taught there. He taught 6th grade. And then he left the year that I was supposed to go into the 6th grade.
Yeah.
But he taught my brother and my 2 sisters, and I was devastated that he left.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be in my daddy's class.
Yeah.
And my sisters and brothers told me, no, you didn't. You really did not want to be. I said, no, he wouldn't have treated me like that. He would have treated me differently, right? So I'm devastated. Daddy got a job because then Mr. McDaniels had become the principal of Douglas High School.
Oh, okay.
So it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
Yes. So Dad got employed at Douglas teaching special ed.
Okay.
Which kind of shaped my attitude and feelings towards people because my dad loved children. And my mom said he was a good father. He helped her with the children. You know, because to have 4 kids under 4, that's a lot, right? But many of his students would come to our house for various reasons.
Really?
And he never treated them any differently. I mean, he was just a fun guy. He treated them all the same. So I think I got that view from him early on that people, regardless of their abilities, are all the same. And they deserve to be respected, treated right, celebrated, appreciated. So I really always look back to that growing up. And so he left. I ended up being in a ladies' class named Evangie McGlon. She was a 6th grade teacher. She went on to become Dr. Evangie McGlon.
All right.
But you know how, you may not know this because you're much younger, but they had kids in tracks. And so we were in the fast track class.
Oh, okay.
And then there was the other 6th grade class. It had bright kids in there because they were good friends of mine, but they were in the different track class, right? Yeah. So they put some of the bright ones in this other track and some of the bright ones in this track. Miss McGlon knew that I was devastated that my daddy wasn't there.
Yeah.
But she figured out how to put me to work. So literally, after lunch every day, I taught the class.
Really?
She went to the teacher's lounge. I mean, but she knew that I could keep control of the class. And my classmates today tell me that they wouldn't know how to read had it not been for me. I didn't know. I just liked doing what I did, right?
Yeah.
By then, my mom was a teacher's aide in the library. So then I got to go into the library after school and wait on her to get off. And, of course, guess what's there? More books.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I think I love to read. I did. I love to read. And left Kennedy, left Crescent Hills, went to John F. Kennedy.
Okay.
Because Kennedy was killed in 1963.
Yeah, November.
Which I believe was my 6th grade year.
Okay.
And then they built a high school, a junior high school, named for Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Kennedy came to dedicate it.
Really?
Uh-huh. And we were the first class to go from 7th through the 9th grade in it.
Wow.
Well, by this time, my mom had gone back to school because she had to quit school.
Mm-hmm.
And had her degree, and she began teaching English. So she taught English in the 9th grade when I was at Kennedy, and actually taught my ex-husband and had to put him out of class one day.
Wow.
I don't know why I didn't pay attention.
That's quite an omen.
I didn't listen to the tea leaves. But that was a wonderful time. So then I get to Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
And at Douglas, there were master's degree and PhD level teachers.
Really?
Because they couldn't teach anywhere else.
Right.
So we had a quality high school education.
Yeah.
I had one white guy in my class, and we both played cello.
Okay.
He was the only white guy in our school, and he actually wanted to be there. His name was Paul Tiffany. He came to the reunion recently, right?
Yeah.
But after that, in 1970 and 71 is when integration kicked in.
Right.
What happened was they took these qualified teachers, black teachers, and put them over in schools like U.S. Grant, Southeast, Capitol Hill, because that's where kids got bused from the east side to Capitol Hill, right? And instead they put into Douglas young white women just coming out of college.
Mm-hmm.
So it changed the quality of education. Yeah. Couple this with the reality at the same time, urban renewal had come in and literally depopulated the east side, tore down homes, relocated black folks to areas where black folks didn't used to live in Oklahoma, like North Highlands, Moore, Edmond, Midwest City. And thus began the decline of our area. Through a combination of the homes being decimated, the population base being decimated, the quality and caliber of the educators changing. I want to say the early onset of the war on drugs.
Sure.
All of these factors had a role in what happened in Northeast Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And now you see, and interestingly, the money that was supposed to come from the community development block grants to repopulate that area, to build those homes, got appropriated to build Bricktown.
Oh.
And Bricktown's doing wonderful.
Sure. Which, it's fine.
But you see Northeast Oklahoma City is in terrible economic straits.
Yeah, it's still neglected.
Very neglected. But just like in most major cities, this process of gentrification is in full blast.
Right.
2nd Street, where I used to go to the doctor, where Master Saloon used to be on the corner, where all these black businesses, where jazz originated in Oklahoma City, is no longer black.
Right.
It's been reclaimed.
Yeah.
And the apartments down in there that people who look like me can't afford to live at. Right?
Yeah. No.
So they're at 4th Street now, and they're aiming to move to 5th Street. And so to slowly take it back is what our community views is going on right now.
Right.
But the education piece in terms of what changed when they took the qualified black teachers out and put in the brand new white teachers, really I think is in full display today in terms of, we're talking about perhaps the grandchildren of the kids who went through that. North Highlands became a gang-infested area in the 80s, but that was where a lot of black people got moved to. So politics and policy and behind-the-scenes maneuverings have again, as a result of integration of the schools, has had a long-term impact. And perhaps it should not have been about integrating the schools, because we were only fighting for separate but equal.
Yeah.
We could have kept our stuff separate.
Exactly.
Just been given the right books, the good books, the materials, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for communities being able to stay intact.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think there's evidence of that. I remember taking a African American sort of like African American history, but it incorporated as part of the history religion and all sorts of things. But I was at OU at the time, and we talked about the Tulsa race riots, and we actually use these examples that you've been talking about in Oklahoma City, and how these were like really flourishing communities.
Yes.
Because sometimes, especially in Tulsa, they had their own stock exchange.
Yeah.
They had all sorts of complicated financial organizations set up to provide for a common flourishing, and it just got ripped apart.
And that was a whole different kind of a rip apart. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a violent rip apart.
That's a quite
right?
literal one. Yeah, but even in the Oklahoma City example, too.
Same process. It just wasn't violent, but it was no less violent.
Yeah, it's just
Black businesses went away.
Yeah.
When you tear away the population base, the black businesses go away. And the businesses are the job creators of a community. They're the engines.
So if we fast forward a little bit, having this experience and having this knowledge as you're working as a Senate aide, or not Senate aide, but a Senate staffer, there's so many opportunities where a person can look at what's happening on the national and state level, and then just say, why are you doing this when there's so much evidence to the contrary? Especially so my point is, if you're actually working within that system as a staffer, it maybe is equally frustrating, or since you're in it and you're able to talk to people and talk through with different things, do you accept it more in some strange way?
Never accept it.
Yeah.
You never accept it. I think you operate from a space of awareness and a space of loyalty to my people, to my community. I appreciate where I grew up. I appreciated that, I went to church, school, and home, and it was all in that square block area. And I noticed when Urban Renewal tore down my church on 9th and Phillips. And that's where the OU Health Sciences Center is now. Right. So our stuff wasn't important enough because they wanted that land. Yeah. And so, sure, today we have OU Health Sciences Center in the heart of the black community, but we still have the worst health outcomes in Oklahoma City. I don't know how that works. But I know at what cost. My dad was very active in our church when we got here. And, he was not a Baptist by birth. So when his church was here, and my mom remained a Baptist, and even her church on 3rd and Byers, Tabernacle Baptist Church, one of the largest black churches, is where 235 runs right now. Yeah. So all of our places and things that were important to us were expendable. And, basically these black churches had bought the white churches when the white churches moved out because the black people moved in, right? Yeah. But I remember my church, it had these beautiful stained glass windows. And they literally had to sue the Urban Renewal Authority to get the value of those windows. Really? Oh, yeah, because they were trying to give them some paltry amount for the church. But you never bemoan the situation. I think you benefit from having that institutional knowledge. And that's the knowledge that I brought to my job. And again, my senator was very supportive of me taking the message to my community about the legislative process
Yeah.
as the way to resolve the issues for people. And yeah, sure, we're outnumbered, but it didn't mean that we didn't have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the elected positions over there in the legislature were created in 1965 behind the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
And so Senate District 48 was literally created. Senator E. Melvin Porter was the first senator.
Okay.
And there were two House districts, House District 99 and House District 97. Well, initially the 97 representative was white because it's north of 23rd, so that area was still above the color line, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, we now have two black reps and one senator for the east side. And don't get me to talking about what gerrymandering has done and reapportionment on that whole deal. But Senator Porter was an outspoken voice. As an attorney, he definitely was an orator on the floor to be reckoned with. Vicki Mouse LaGrange came and took his place, right? And mind you, I worked in the Senate when Senator Porter was there. Mm-hmm. And then I was there when Senator Miles LaGrange was there and when Senator Munson was there. And I was the fourth senator for the area, and I had worked for all the previous senators.
Yeah.
So you're talking some institutional memory going full blast is what I had. But I grew up in the area, and I knew that, you know, you got to be at the table.
Yeah.
I ran for office 2 times before I was elected to the Senate.
Okay.
Behind my involvement in PTA. Mind you, I lived in Forest Park. So first, I went to Penn from Douglas High School.
Okay. Studied French.
Yeah. Earned a full scholarship.
Wow.
Was very active. That's where I became politically active on my own.
Okay.
In Philadelphia, because Penn is a predominantly white Ivy League institution.
Okay.
But it sits in the heart of West Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Which is black.
Sure it is.
So on the one hand, I was in the ivory walls and the ivory towers, but I could go across the street and be in a community that looked just like mine.
Yeah.
So it was there that I got inspired. I worked at the Y. I worked on a campaign for a state representative. Just really found my own as a person who literally was interested in politics. So political science was my minor. And I didn't know. I just I want to take that course, right?
Yeah.
So I graduated Penn, came back to Oklahoma, and, you know, worked for the CETA program, Comprehensive Employment and Training Act.
Okay.
And lived kind of in Northwest. I lived South Oklahoma City, Northwest Oklahoma City, and finally got married and moved to Little Axe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we were living on a farm, 160-acre farm.
Wow.
You know, I had my kids out there. We moved to Forest Park in 1992. Forest Park is in the Middale School District.
Yeah.
Not Oklahoma City Public Schools.
Gotcha.
And I was okay with that. I mean, even though Midwest City was our major rival in high school, I mean, seriously, Douglas and Midwest City. Midwest City was a sundown town. I ran for the school board. Well, I ran for the town trustee of Forest Park because there was some bad blood between the town and our school, which was Pleasant Hill Elementary School. And it was the only school in the town, but it was in the Middale District. And that's a long story, too.
Okay.
But I ran because I disagreed. I thought that the town should be supportive of the school. We should celebrate that school, embrace that school. And I think things have gotten better. But I lost that race. Then I subsequently ran for the Middale School Board, again, behind my involvement in PTA. I was president of Pleasant Hill PTA. Then I went on to become the legislative liaison for the Middale PTA Council because of my background in the legislature. So I kind of enlightened them about a lot of things. And my senator let me do that kind of stuff. Right?
Okay.
So I ran for the school board because Middale has 5 members, 3 from Midwest City and 2 from Dale City, and none from Forest Park.
Interesting.
But we probably pay higher ad valorem taxes than any of those other areas because of the property values out there. But I also observed that when my kids had to go there, because politics, the Middale School Board just decided to willy-nilly downsize our elementary school from K through 6 to K through 4, K through 3. So I had to take my second child, my baby girl, and take her to another school. Well, I took her to Creston Hill. She went there for a year. And then I went ahead and took her to Ridgecrest. Oh. And it is at that point that I observed the way these teachers were interacting with the black kids. I just stood outside the door one day and I watched. And I'm like, wow. It was really amazing to see that kind of behavior. But this was an older white woman. She's of the sundown generation, right? Sundown town generation. So I got involved in the Midwest City Martin Luther King Prayer Breakfast Committee. Okay. To try to work on those issues. And that committee came together. The police chief sponsored it, created it, because he believed in community policing and police being involved in the community. But it was behind the thought that we had more in common than we had different. So we created a prayer breakfast, and Clara Lupa was involved in creating it, that brought people together to do the things we have in common, like praying, eating, singing, fellowshipping. And so that committee and that breakfast is still in existence today, but its roots stem from the need to have better relationships in Midwest City. Midwest City is more than 25% black. Yeah. Midwest City High School is probably a majority of black students now.
I'd say so.
So, my son was the drum major for the Midwest City High School in 1998.
Oh, cool.
I mean, he literally worked hard and won that. But they would not give it to him without also including this other girl who was white, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah, but she never directed. He was the drum major. Yeah. But it just shows you the mindset that I noticed when we're talking about race. Sure. And the differences and how you respond to that. So in both cases, I've been proactive about how do we address the problem. Yeah. You can't just say that it's okay and not be found trying to do anything. Right. The last thing you want to do is not do anything or to give up hope or act like there is no hope. So when I say never give up, I'm willing to talk till the day I die, to raise awareness, to advocate about fair, equal, and just treatment for all people, regardless of race, gender, orientation, socioeconomic status. All of those things are what came out of growing up on the east side in Oklahoma City, is to be a voice. So in the legislature, so my story, I started working at the Oklahoma State Senate in 1981 as a staff person. I had worked for the city of Oklahoma City in between the time I worked for CETA. Okay. Went on staff as the only black person on Senate staff. Really? In 1981, there was a sign above the water fountain on the first floor, East Hall in the Capitol, that said colored drinking fountain.
In 81?
This is in 1981. Oh my gosh. I wish I had taken a picture. But it was an interesting experience. I was a good writer. So that's how I was able to survive because, I had my fair share of racist things directed at me. But I had gone to a white school, so I kind of understood. And, it didn't bother me. I know good white people. I know racist white people, Sure. I know good black people. I know racist black people. Yeah. So, but it was a unique opportunity to be able. They wanted someone who could write legislation in non-legal terms. Yeah. So that's
pretty
how
important.
Yeah, so that people can understand. Like this 8th grade reading level standard was the rule at the time, and the Republicans have long since done away with that standard. But people needed to be able to understand the law, and so it needed to be written in ways that were reader friendly. So I'm very proud of having pretty much rewritten Title 63 in Oklahoma statutes, Title 10, Title 43A. Those about children, mental health, public health and safety. Some Title 74, which was about state government. Okay. And to have been a contributor in reform legislation, starting with Medicaid reform, health care reform, child care reform, child welfare reform, to have had that experience, because now I have the institutional knowledge about why those things were and what we did to fix them. I also have the unfortunate experience of having watched those things be dismantled simply because the new people felt they were democratic issues, so they just did whatever they could to destroy them.
Yeah, so from 1981, I mean, you've been in a place where you've got to see it transition from a conservative yet Democrat, I would say, moderate to conservative yet Democratic in name and numbers, to a almost completely Republican legislature.
Sure.
So what has been like? What was that like?
See, because, and you nailed it, the conservative Democrats. Yeah. When I went in the Senate in 2005, it was a special election. I literally took a great risk to do it, but after everything I've shared with you and everything I knew that I felt blessed to have received, and we got term limits, I think in 1993, so 12 years later, in 2005, my senator termed out, and by the way, I helped her get elected. But about in 2000, I got this little small voice in my head about, well, term limits are coming, why don't you run?
Yeah.
And I said, oh, no, I have 2 years to go to retire. I'm making $65,000 a year.
Yeah.
All of those reasons, why not?
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
But as the time got nearer, I tell people a lot of things started happening in ways that made it clear that that voice that I had heard wasn't playing with me.
Yeah.
And the one thing that happened is that, and this happened while I was running for the school board, the only lady who could have beat me in that race died at 39 years of age.
Oh, goodness.
She was a newspaper publisher, beautiful, talented black woman. She had been the executive assistant to the senator.
Okay.
Ventriloquist, musician, beautiful woman.
Wow.
And some fluky female surgery went wrong.
Really?
And she died.
Oh, gosh.
So when that happened, I'm like, wow. So the time came, I had to make the decision. And literally, I was running against 3 people who had been elected before. But I had to quit my job. I was unemployed 6 months, no insurance.
Sure.
2 kids still in school.
Quite a risk.
And took a $25,000 pay cut. Because I felt that everything that I had been through was for such a time as then.
Yeah.
And everything that I had accrued or benefited from, I was supposed to give back.
Yeah.
And I won. And I've never suffered as a result of it. I mean, I'm probably more like most Oklahomans than most Oklahomans because, I'm one paycheck away from a financial crisis.
Yeah.
But we're a family. We're an Oklahoma family dealing with the reality of policies that impact families. And having the experience of having written the laws, to know why we were writing the laws and, knowing how to write them and seeing the outcomes. And, legislation isn't perfect, so you go back and you tweak it and you fix it. One of the areas we talked about was disparities in health care.
Yeah.
And that's truly a racial disparity in health care.
Yeah.
The racial disparity in incarceration in Oklahoma and in wrongful convictions and people who get the death penalty versus who doesn't, right?
Right.
And race is, in the newspaper article, something, where they were comparing candidates to who they should be in WWE.
I read that.
You read that, right? Did you read the one about me?
Yeah, you were...
some guy. who was supposed to smash in a truck window or something.
Oh, yeah, you were Booker T. Booker T was a famous wrestler. Probably the height of his fame was in the late 90s. I loved wrestling as a kid, but yeah.
I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
But they made the statement that I had been known to talk about race in the Democratic Party and on the floor of the legislature. Mm-hmm. Well, duh. What else you going to talk about when it's in your face, right?
Yeah.
When you know that the first bill ever passed in Oklahoma was a race bill. Really? Senate Bill 1 was the Jim Crow law.
Ugh.
Literally, the first, not the House bill, the Senate Bill 1. You know, and I was helping a friend do a history test. I wasn't helping her. You know, she did a test on her own. But I liked it because, you know, I didn't necessarily pay attention in history all the time. Mm-hmm. And certainly not Oklahoma history. But we were reading about Alfalfa Bill Murray.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, the whole controversy at OSU about the building being named after him, and he was a notorious racist.
Yeah.
Well, he was in the legislature, and I think he was one of the sponsors of the Jim Crow law, right? Mm-hmm. It had been in the Constitution when we were applying for statehood. The U.S. Rejected it, told them to take it out. They took it out. We became a state, and Senate Bill 1. Wow. Not Senate Bill 2, not House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1. So that tells you that race is an issue in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I believe that we could solve every problem in Oklahoma. We could solve health care, mental health, roads and bridges, veterans, people with disabilities, mm-hmm. and we would still have an issue with race.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. So for me not to talk about that and not to own that reality, and sometimes I regret that I have that filter, but it is what it is.
And that's also a part of your experience, too. And if your experience makes you where you are put you where you are in your vocation or as a politician or public servant or whatever, then that's
what you bring to the table.
Yeah, that's just part of it.
Yeah, I can't not be me. And I can't not speak out about the things that I see mm-hmm. are problematic in Oklahoma until we solve them. I think eventually we will become less race-oriented. It's not in your and my generation.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's going to be a slow burn.
It's a slow burn. Maybe 3-4 generations from now. My daughter, for example, went to O State. She said it was the most racist experience she'd ever had in her life.
Oh, wow.
But most of her friends are white.
Yeah.
And so she is like, if you think I'm a radical, she's very radical. But she has friends who respect her and appreciate her. So it's not even in her generation.
Yeah.
My other daughter has a 6-year-old. Mm-hmm. And that little girl does not meet a stranger. Right? And loves children. So she's been on the battlegrounds with me since she was born, right? Yeah. She's been at death penalty rallies. You know, she stood in front of the governor's mansion on the vigil, you know, on the night they killed somebody. The Earth Day mm-hmm. Celebration, she was there with me. But there will be other little children there. And they have the best time.
Yeah.
They really don't see color in those cases. They are children. And I think the people who are around us, like me, are open and honest people. So I know I can feel comfortable that there's no reason for that child to have been turned into something that they weren't born into, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel that my grandchild can be comfortable, and I see her. I see her interacting. So maybe not in her generation or the generation after that, but certainly after that, we will look more like Toronto, Canada, and Oklahoma. And it's already happening. Mm-hmm. I mean, our Hispanic population is booming. And if anybody thinks Hispanics are going anywhere, they're misled.
Yeah.
And I appreciate them, because what I appreciate about Oklahoma is the diversity.
Yeah.
We were a melting pot from the get-go, right? In terms of the Indians.
Why we were created.
This was supposed to be an all-black state in the first place, right?
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Yes.
Actually.
Yes. Oklahoma was intended to be an all-black state. Then they located the Indians here on the Trail of Tears.
Okay.
Then we found oil, and then the Indians and the blacks got pitted against one another in favor of the white man's oil, right? Yeah. But that's the history. the melting pot, the leftover piece where everybody came. And so now you have what I see is a benefit of diversity. And the biggest benefit to me is the food. When the Vietnamese came, we got some new kind of food. Yeah. When we've got Puerto Ricans, we've got just a variety of food. Mm-hmm. And when people start interacting with other cultures and figuring out, well, they put their pants on just like we do.
Right.
They want the same thing for their children. While we're not embracing them culturally and in any other way, it's just beyond me. Mm-hmm. I'm not threatened, but I believe what we have today in politics is this vitriolic imaging of people being told that, well, this group is going to take from you.
Yeah.
When all of us are poor.
Yeah.
Right? We're all in the same boat, but they believe because their color is different that they have one leg up. It shouldn't matter. We're all suffering under whatever we're under right now, and it's a Republican administration.
In terms of like how to undo the damage of a dismantled state in terms of education, what they, rejecting federal dollars for Medicaid expansion, how does one begin to rebuild the damage, especially within the context of the understanding that like you'll be a Democratic governor and you'll have to work with a majority Republican House and Senate. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, education and awareness. Being truthful about all the things I've told you about today, because I do have the institutional memory to say, well, this is how it was. This is what happened. Mm-hmm. Then it got changed, and you see where we are today. And let's just go back to the very beginning from what I can remember. With term limits, you don't have that kind of knowledge anymore among the legislators. And so House members have to get reelected every 2 years.
Yeah.
They come in the door seeking their next reelection. They buy into the party politics, Democrats and Republicans, because we were talking about the conservative Democrats.
Yeah.
When I first went into the legislature, I'm offering pretty radical proposals, and the Democrats didn't even hear my bills.
Yeah.
Right? So you can imagine 2006, I believe we were in a tied legislature in the Senate. Mm-hmm. The House had already succumbed. But, I was still different from the Democrats because I was pushing for issues that were outside the box.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's little institutional memory and knowledge, the fact that during that period of time, Democrats bought into some things that have had a negative impact on the state under a Republican governor, right? And this way of thinking precipitated some initiatives, some state questions that have had a major impact on our well-being. Yeah. One of them being right to work. One of them being State Question 640, which limits how you can tax.
Okay.
Right? Several state ballot questions have meant bad for us.
Right.
So it's going to be about educating the people about, look, right to work is not working.
Right.
It's suppressing wages. It is leading to disproportionate firing of groups of people. State Question 640, limiting our ability to tax when our state is growing, has outweighed its usefulness.
Yeah.
And it was done in an environment of limiting taxation. Well, government operates for the people. And the concern about government waste, well, government waste is no worse than government underperforming.
Yeah.
And right now we have underperforming governance, right? At the time that we have a huge population, a bigger population, we're like, 3.3 million?
Yeah.
The time that I was serving, for the most part, we always hovered right around 3 million. So if nothing else, we got 0.3 million more people. And we're still trying to address the needs of those people on a budget that is limited because you can't raise taxes.
Right.
So the needs of the people have grown exponentially. When poor health care outcomes, obesity, chronic disease, diabetes, cardiovascular, cancer, it gets to be an environmental issue. All these things are wreaking havoc on the people.
Yeah.
And then our governor refuses, and legislature refuses to expand Medicaid, which means we have a large group of people who are not covered by any kind of health insurance, which means they go to the emergency room and then drive up the bills for everybody else. That's just the reality of uncompensated care.
Yeah.
And the amount of money, not just the money, but the benefit to the citizens of improved health care means that because we didn't get it, we're in a bad situation. So we have sicker people with less money to spend for them. We've tried some games like Medicaid, Advantage Care. That didn't work, right? And so that's health care. The same time, remember I mentioned the war on drugs?
Sure.
So we got mass incarceration, we got over-incarceration, we've got children being thrown into the pipeline via a broken foster care system in order to keep our 98% bed occupancy guarantee that we give to private prisons, right, who then turn around and donate to the campaigns of policymakers to keep those bills coming, right? Commodification of humans. So you got healthcare, you got mass incarceration, you got over-incarceration of people for non-violent substance-type crime and mental illness.
Sure.
And the dual diagnosis that sometimes comes in there. But instead of treating people at a much cheaper rate, quarter of what it costs to lock them up, we're sending them to prison. And the only budget that has been growing in the last few years is the Department of Corrections budget, right?
Yeah.
Not education, not health care. So I don't believe the legislature, because of the brand new status, is aware of this picture that I see. Because I was talking about it over there in 2005. In 2000, we did a study that found out that 60% of the kids at Millwood, which is a pretty well-to-do neighborhood, right, were being raised by their grandparents because the parents were in prison.
Wow.
For, most likely, nonviolent, simple possession charges. Today, 87% of the kids at Douglas High School have one or more parent who's been in prison.
Wow.
That just means 13% don't. Right?
That's crazy.
It's crazy, but they don't know this. So the things I've been talking about in my little corner of the world are now impacting the whole state. It's not just on the east side anymore.
Yeah.
And to the extent that people have their heads in the sand and they don't want to look up and acknowledge the impact of incarceration, of poor health, of poor mental health, of poor environmental, the rates of asthma are off the chart in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Environmental injustice. 5 of the 6 Superfund sites in Oklahoma are on the east side. And guess what? Cancer rates are off the chart. Asthma rates. Albuterol inhalers.
Yeah.
Like candy at the CVS on 23rd and Martin Luther King.
So we're creating our own chronic conditions as well.
And then the governor would not accept the Justice Reinvestment Initiative monies, which would have stopped sending so many people to prison and instead sent them into treatment as a way of cutting down on the cost of incarceration. Texas did it. It took Oklahoma to mess it up. But as an alternative to locking people up, we start to treat people.
Yeah.
The citizens then spoke in State Question 780,
Yep.
right, and said, no, we don't want that to be a felony any longer.
Yeah.
It's a misdemeanor now. But lo and behold, the money, follow the money. Now when you get pulled over in possession of a doobie, you're being mandated to go to 3 years of treatment at a cost of $600 a month. And the treatment is being provided by a private prison industry, right? But the attorneys are in on it too. Because to get an attorney, you're going to have to pay $1,000 to $4,500 in attorney fees.
Yeah.
See, so it's all about the money in the system. That's what we need to interrupt. and stop dedicating the money to somebody's pockets and start investing it in the people and start to heal our community, to start to heal our people. So that whole education piece is number one with the legislature.
Yeah.
And accountability. Because as governor, when we're sitting having the budget discussions, I'm going to have people's ethics reports right there next to me. And I can see, are you really speaking for the pharmaceutical company or are you speaking for your people? What do you tell me? When you're saying that what you think is okay, really? Seriously? And so I know that. I know to hold people accountable for who's paying them. I never took a buy off.
Yeah.
But I know they happened.
Mm-hmm.
I've eaten people's steaks and voted against their bills the next day. Right? And so it's that kind of accountability. But cutting down on incarceration alone can fund education.
Yeah.
It can help fund education. Getting real about the gross production tax and the 2% versus the 7%. I think even the oil people know it's time to do something different.
Yeah, I think even George Kaiser himself, penned a nice op-ed in the Tulsa World that said the same exact thing.
Surely. And I'm going to tell you and I always talk about this, and this is going to be on a podcast, but tell the truth, shame the devil, right?
Yeah.
2014 was the year they reduced that down to 2%. Mm-hmm. It's the year I was running for the U.S. Senate. So, mind you, I was kind of busy doing some things in my office, and there was a tie vote on the floor on that bill. And they called Todd Lamb to the chamber to vote on it, to break the tie. Mm. Now, I'm not sure where my Democratic whip was that they didn't call me to the chamber to tie it back up. It just made me go, what was up with that?
Yeah.
We'll just leave that alone. We're going to leave that right there, okay?
All right.
But people have got to get realistic about oil and gas, the role of oil and gas in Oklahoma. Yeah. We've got alternative energy with 300-something days of sunshine.
Yeah.
Tremendous winds that come sweeping down the plain, right? And to the extent that we're not investing and empowering and enabling those other sources of energy, fossil fuels are going to dry up one day, right? Yeah. So that's an education piece. The big piece, my solution for an economic boom in Oklahoma still comes back to the war on drugs and advocating for changing our policies about cannabis. Mm-hmm. Cannabis. One form is marijuana and one form is hemp. Mm-hmm.
Out of hemp you can make rope, paper, hemp protein, which I've actually purchased before.
It's very expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Colorado's getting 50% of the U.S. supply.
So what's illegal about hemp? The production of it? So we can't
growing it.
We can't, so we can't grow it, but
hemp.
You can clearly sell it. I think. Because I think I bought some at Sprouts once. Either that or it was a free
you can buy
sample.
hemp, yes.
Sure. Yeah.
But you can't grow it in Oklahoma.
Right.
They spend money burning it down, right?
Uh-huh, yeah.
It grows between the cracks of the concrete here 4 times a year. It only grows 2 times a year in Colorado.
Yeah.
It's our natural resource, right? We used to lead the nation in rope production in World War II because of how well hemp grows here.
Oh.
The government used to pay farmers to grow hemp.
Wow.
Uh-huh. So it's an economic resource in the ground just as much as oil and gas is in the ground in Oklahoma. But we have demonized it and criminalized it coming out of the 30s, right? And people have bought into the reefer madness mentality.
Yeah, still.
To this day.
To this day. It's
to this
2017.
Day. And my community gets it less than anybody else. You know, if you do the crime, you should do the time. No, Granny.
Yeah.
The laws are not written like that. They don't be enforced on you the same way they're going to be enforced on somebody in the Northwest.
Oh, I can confirm that. That's
yes,
true.
You can. Yes, you can. I'm not dreaming this up. But the reality is we have a natural resource that grows here abundantly that God gave us.
Yeah.
44 million acres of land in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
From 1 acre over the course of 4 years, you can get at least $500 million.
Yeah.
So just let's say 10,000 acres. But think about, number one, the medicine that comes from him. That's my main piece. Children with epilepsy, veterans with PTSD, people who are wasting away from cancer, Crohn's disease, glaucoma, all kinds of diseases and conditions can be treated using CBD oil, which is what comes from hemp. It has less than a 0.3% THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient. You know all this.
Yeah.
Okay. And the point is, why
You're choosing
are we
different phrasing, but yeah, it's the same thing.
Why are we burning it down and not Indian tribes could add to their gaming income? Black towns could get a resurgence because black people own land in Oklahoma.
Yeah, if you can produce it, there's no as broader market trends change. So if there's like if folks don't want to grow alfalfa anymore because there's a market reduction in the amount of carbs that people consume or whatever, like there's so many reactions and ways to exploit that versus being forced to grow the same things or do a more expensive transition into making it, cattle farm land or something.
Yeah. It cleans the soil.
Yeah.
It doesn't use a lot of water. It's very drought hardy.
We need
Grows
that.
4 times a year, right?
That's crazy.
So this is something that God gave us in Oklahoma. Genesis 1:29. He created every plant, said it was good, right? But the medicine alone that comes from him, the benefit to farmers who could grow, produce, and distribute hemp would be enough money to solve the economic problems of our budget right now. Colorado has so much money, they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Vegas
is about to go the same way.
50% of the nation's supply of hemp comes from Colorado. That's Oklahoma's crop.
Yeah.
So then, apart from that, medical marijuana, which we're going to vote on, State Question 788.
That's right, 2018, right?
I'm the mother of the movement.
Yeah.
I first introduced the bill in 2007 and introduced it every 2 years after that, right? Because, again, hemp, CBD oil can treat things.
Yeah.
But CBD needs some of the THC in order to be better, to do better, right?
To be a whole
medicinal application. And so we actually worked across the aisles with the Republicans in the House to get the Katie's Law bill. It was kind of it was something. I don't even know what to call it. But the first go-round, Representative Echols, floor leader now, created the bill because his niece Katie was having those seizures. And he went to Colorado, studied the issue, came back, introduced the bill, creating a clinical trial using OU Health Sciences Center and for children under 18. So that passed, and he was so worried he was going to get primaried, right?
Yeah.
So, not that anything happened, but the law was on the books.
Yeah.
The next year, he came back and amended it and allowed people up to any age to participate in the clinical trial. Mind you, there's drama at OU Health Sciences Center about how to do the clinical trials.
Sure.
And we found out it cost $1,200 to get into the doctor to even get sent to the clinical trial. So guess who wasn't going to be able to participate, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't get primaried after that. So at this point, I'm like, see?
Yeah. Nothing to worry about, man.
So we talked to him the next time, this past year. He got another bill passed. And at the behest of GW Pharmaceuticals. So I can't tell you that the bill is all about the people, but it's still moving us in the right direction. We have to take what we can get.
Progress is slow.
I believe once we pass State Question 788, and I believe it will pass.
Yeah.
I believe the people of Oklahoma are tired of being lied to. They know that people are suffering. They know that people are smoking weed anyway.
Yeah.
They know that Oklahomans are unhealthy.
We're tired of being the last to do things.
And, Oklahomans are tired of being dead last in everything.
Yeah.
Especially when we got our heads in the sand about it, And we're spending money locking people up who need to be treated. We even locking up veterans for growing a plant in their backyard to help their situations.
Yeah.
Now, how vicious is that on our part as a state?
It's pretty messed up, especially in the context of, even if, and I read this study recently, even if a parent is on drugs or whatever, it's still better to have them in the lives of their kids versus being locked away and then sent to as you say, an already overburdened foster care system.
Yep.
So,
I was I was trying to get some gas in my cheapest place I go to one night, and I pulled up, and it's like 8 police cars. And this was like 2 or 3 days before the law took effect on July 1st.
Oh, okay.
And, it took me like 20 minutes to get some gas. 8 police cars around one car. Wow. That's what happens. That's how it happens on the east side.
Yeah.
So I sent Chief City a note. I say, seriously, Chief? 8 cars for one over here? I don't think it happens like that in Northwest Oklahoma City. Anyway, so after I finally got to pull up there, I talked to 2 of the police officers, and one was an older guy and one was a younger guy. I said, well, what's going on? The young guy, well, we caught a guy. He had marijuana in the car with his kids. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
So they, of course, arrested him. He made a poor choice.
Sure.
Right? But what was going to happen to his kids?
Yeah.
Behind a bag of weed. And so this was before July 1. And then after July 1, I told you how the game is getting played now because of the money. But the policies that are, again, locking people up for nonviolent, simple possession of marijuana, and I don't call marijuana a drug, unlike crack, cocaine, and cocaine, things you have to process, right? And meth, and opioids, right? Oh, yeah. The GW Pharmaceutical take in Representative Eccles' bill was so that they could come in and get the leg up on whatever can happen in Oklahoma with CBD and hemp.
Yeah.
Now, Oklahoma is one of 3 states that still don't allow us to grow hemp, but that's a law that needs to change.
Yeah.
Again, that one change in the law could undo the budget deficit and put us in the positive.
Yeah.
If we can educate the people and get them out of the reefer madness mindset that, look, we've got something that's natural here that can save people's lives, that can help veterans not commit suicide at record levels, and get them understanding. So I believe once medical marijuana passes, then people will see that, well, we didn't go crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we can open the door to full legalization of marijuana because people are getting high in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're choosing some terrible ways to do it.
Oh, yeah. But they're smoking weed. Let me say they're smoking weed.
Yeah, plenty of people are doing that. And most of them are in the suburbs.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't know how I was going to say that. But
yeah.
And I would much rather them go home and smoke a joint and then to drink and drive.
Right.
Right? I'm not advocating anybody being in an altered mind state and driving.
Yeah.
Because most people who smoke weed get the munchies and go to sleep, right? But people who do alcohol get aggressive. People who do prescription drugs are even worse. That's our leading cause of overdose deaths in Oklahoma is prescription drugs. So the medical cost of all of that, the cost in lives of people dying in car accidents with drunk drivers, all of that starts to go away. Colorado is not having the same drama anymore that they had before they've legalized
had some new pop-up things, but they're manageable.
Very manageable. I think the biggest manageable area is, people smoking and going to work.
Yeah.
I think, but I know many people, I even know legislators who said, the minute I retire from the legislature, I'm going to smoke via joy, right? And so weed is not addictive, first of all.
Right.
So why people are being forced to go to treatment behind marijuana is a part of the money game, right? Because I know people all the time who say, well, I can't smoke because I may get pee tested. Yeah. And they don't smoke.
Yeah.
They literally stop smoking go to work,
Yeah.
have a career, retire, and then they do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, I think, is the norm more so than people really realize. It's not an addictive state where, like crack or cocaine,
Right.
you gotta have it. You can't make it if you don't get it. It's a whole different world. And because of that, right now the drug cartels are making the money.
Yep.
The criminal justice system is making the money through private prison contracts.
Yeah.
And the vendors and all of the contracts that go with that. And all of that money could be accruing to the people of Oklahoma in terms of better education,
Yeah.
better mental health care treatment and services, roads and bridges, environmental concerns.
Yeah.
Everything could be better if we would just get our heads out the sand about that one issue.
5 final questions for you. And this
Okay,
is sort of
and
like a wrap.
I'll try to keep it short.
No, you're good. You're good. This is the final 5. I ask it of everybody. What's your morning routine?
I'm retired,
Okay.
and what I've learned in retirement is to get 8 hours of sleep. So if I don't go to bed till 12, of course, I don't get up until 8.
Yeah.
And if I don't get my sleep, I can't function right.
Sure.
So most time I go to about 12 or 1, get up about 8 or 9. I come, and I don't eat breakfast like I should.
Okay.
And I know I should eat breakfast, so I started trying to eat oatmeal every morning.
Good.
Recently. I'm going to get back into the shakes, right, because I gained a little weight. Don't tell nobody. But if not, I will have an apple, orange,
Right on.
some kind of fruit, something.
That's good.
And then I come to work here, dialing for dollars, working on my campaign. And I just have, and in between, I'm probably going to take a phone call that I probably shouldn't have taken because somebody needs some help. I'm probably a social worker.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge being a social worker, working on the micro level when you're trying to get to the macro level so you can help everybody at the micro level, right?
Yeah.
But I take those calls anyway. But for the most part, I come, I do this work here. I have meetings. I go talk with people about raising money, about issues, about policies. One of my big things is asking people what keeps you up at night. On any given day, we'll be traveling around the state. So my routine is all about running for governor.
All right. What's your biggest musical influence?
Gosh, I'm a musician.
Well, it's going to be a tough one. The next one's going to be a
Yeah.
tough one, too, based off of
I'm
what
a
you said.
musician. I started playing piano and violin when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
Music is my life. I would rather sing than do anything I do.
Yeah.
You know, they say I can sing.
Yeah.
I like to sing, but I think other people can sing better than me. But I love to sing. My children, even my granddaughter, they get sick of me because if they ask me a question, I'm going to sing a song to answer it, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, my dad was, he was pretty boy. He could dance. He liked music. They could do all that. He and his cousin could do all that bop dancing, swinging through his legs and all that over the back and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But growing up, he had albums in the house.
Right.
And so my thing was to clean up the house to Aretha Franklin.
Oh, nice.
So I probably know every Aretha Franklin song there is.
Okay.
My kids know every Aretha Franklin song there is.
Nice.
But my kids went on to be that other part of me that I didn't develop into. So my son, like I told you, he was
Drum major.
He's a saxophonist, but he plays keyboards. He's a musician in Philadelphia.
Oh, cool.
The daughter, the first daughter, is, and they're 9 years apart. Right?
Okay. Wow.
The first daughter played saxophone and piano. She had Mary. I can't think of Mary's name, but she's a music teacher here in the city. Mary, and she's a jazz musician.
Okay.
They play a lot around town. But she taught my daughter how to play from her head into her fingertips.
Oh, wow.
Right. And the second daughter is a singer.
All right.
So those kids
Yeah.
took my music inclinations and literally became the things that I wanted to be.
That's cool.
Now, they are artists, but they will not draw. My oldest girl is a graphic designer. She used to work for the Thunder. She does all of my campaign stuff.
Oh, nice.
So music-wise, I love classical music. songs are just in my head all day long.
Yeah.
And even my granddaughter now, she does dun 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 dun. So I have that on Spotify for her.
Yeah.
But we also do Rawhide.
Oh, yeah.
Moving, right? So music, just music. And Aretha's influence. I love Patti LaBelle. I love jazz. Grover Washington. That's why my son plays saxophone.
Yeah.
The Jazz Crusaders. I was at the opening of the Jazz Hall of Fame this past weekend.
Yeah.
Where Dr. Ron Myers, another colleague in the pain management industry and using medical marijuana instead of opioid drugs.
Yeah.
He's a musician. He plays a hella horn, right? And I didn't even know that until I saw him at that event.
Wow.
So did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
All right, this is a tough one. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book.
Since you read so much, maybe even your favorite book right now.
Well, I read a lot now about hemp.
Trying to bone up on the material.
Yeah, just adding to my knowledge base.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I haven't sat and read a book in a while.
Yeah.
And
For pleasure.
Yeah,
Like
for pleasure.
sake, yeah.
Right. I read for information's sake now.
Yeah.
And I should, but I don't have time.
Yeah. I hear you.
And I'm a compulsive reader. So if I read a book, I'm not going to do anything else.
Right.
But, like I said, I loved Gone with the Wind.
Oh, yeah?
I read that when I was in the 4th grade. And I still remember it to this day. That's one that sticks out in my mind. I know that's old, but
That's all right.
This is a good book, The Island Child.
Oh, I haven't seen
By
that.
Barack Obama.
Oh, really?
I'm reading it to my granddaughter.
This is my first time seeing that. I'll just check that out.
This writer, Laura Lee Cooley,
Okay.
lives in El Reno.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
This is a wonderful book.
Yeah.
I started reading it to my granddaughter the other day, but I plan to read that. Here's a wonderful book that I hope to be able to finish, written by former state rep Mike Mass.
Beneath the Vines.
Who went to prison.
Yeah.
Who is a changed man. And
I've
started reading it. It's an amazing book.
Is it?
I just don't
That's
have
cool.
time to finish it.
Yeah.
But this is the book I'm working on right now.
All right, that's Beneath the Vines.
Beneath the Vines. Yeah.
What's your favorite spot in Oklahoma?
Probably Mount Scott.
I love Mount Scott. I love the trails around Mount Scott. So everything within the Wichita system there is pretty awesome.
But after that, it would be eastern Oklahoma and the lush green environment. But a destination point for me is Mount Scott.
Cool. And I think you answered the 5th question whenever you talked about having to do something at night at the Y with the aerobics and stuff like that. So I think we're good.
I do water aerobics because of my hips. But when I first started to campaign in 2005, I had a personal trainer, and that's whose class I'm going to tonight. But he had me in the best shape. It's metabolic fitness.
Okay.
And we use our own weight to train. And you combine that with cardiovascular, and it really does work. So we all have to have some kind of physical activity. I wish I would walk more.
Yeah.
And I think about it, but that's boring.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, this exercise routine, like if my hips don't hurt too bad, when my hips hurt really bad, and it's arthritis, literally. I have a disease.
Yeah.
And it runs in my family. Water is the best solution for it. So I use the water to strengthen my joints. And then I go to the metabolic fitness programs. And then I've gotten into yoga too.
Oh, cool.
Because as you age, you need to stretch a little more.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so I'm not sedentary by any means. And I wish I was doing more. but I think it's also it makes you want to come back once you do it. Because he also has a class on Saturday mornings at 8 o'clock, so I get up and go to that class.
Right on.
I figure out a way.
When you find a person that you like, that's good.
Yeah.
Connie Johnson, Senator Connie Johnson, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Are we watching a movie?
No, I'm going to watch Ken Burns.
It's not really good.
You don't think Ken Burns is good?
I don't want to watch Ken Burns. You can't watch Ken Burns.
She was so nice. Thanks again for taking the time to Senator Johnson. Best of luck with the campaign. That is not an endorsement. That is just me being a good person and saying best of luck with the campaign. Subscribe in your podcast app. Check out the Y'all OK Facebook page. And if you have any questions or comments about the show, you can email them to yallokpodcast@gmail.com. That's YALL, not YAWL. I don't even know why that's still a question in anyone's mind. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.